Welcome to Smart Route, the podcast by CallTrackingMetrics, where you'll hear stories from businesses at the intersection of marketing, customer experience, and sales. We're sitting down with business leaders and industry experts to dive deep into the path they took to find success. Here are your hosts, Brandon Jordan and Peter Bacon.
Welcome to the CallTrackingMetrics Smart Route podcast. I am Brandon Jordan, one half of the dynamic duo with my co-host Peter Bacon. And today we have Lindsey Groepper, the president of Blast Media, an amazing PR firm. Lindsey, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm Lindsey Groepper. I'm president of Blast Media. We are a public relations agency that services B2B SaaS companies exclusively. And we got hooked up because we are very proud of the fact that CallTrackingMetrics is a client of ours. And when our account team came to me with this idea and said they actually have a podcast and feel like you might make for a good guest, I was pumped about it. So we had our initial sort of discovery call together, and I'm excited about what we are going to tackle today.
Absolutely. And to that point, today's topics, we're going to talk all about PR, right? Lindsey, you have over 15, almost 20 years of experience in the industry. And you guys, you're also a host of the SaaS Have Full podcast as well. So had a chance to check that out. Definitely some great topics there. And today we're going to talk about, not ignoring the PR, right? How to use PR to create a high value brand and kind of dive into that conversation. Without further ado, I think the biggest question that I have, that we all have, right, is right now, everyone is really competing for media coverage these days, right? So what, in your opinion, would be your top 3 pieces of advice for a company to get noticed or have their press releases picked up?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's important to maybe take a step back and address sort of where we are in the marketing landscape today, because it's changed. It's tough out there for marketers. The last 18 months, or if you want to extend it further, has been really tough. And specifically, if you are a marketer at a technology company, but all around, right? When the economy is bad, budgets get tight, and inevitably one of the areas that gets cut, which we can have a whole other episode on why this is idiotic, but revenue generating functions, people, programs, budget tends to get cut. Yeah. So unfortunately, marketers have been really challenged with this do more with less mandate over the last 18 months, which is really tough, right? Do more with less is hard for anyone. And when we look at it from a marketing standpoint, a lot of what tends to get cut then from that budget is the brand spend. So you have your immediate ROI pipeline generating activities and strategies that are so we can put this spotlight on. But what happens then is when you cut the brand spend, everything suffers. So this sort of short-term gain mentality has really bit a lot of brands in the butt here over the last 18 months, not to any faults of their own. This is what they have been told to do. So now what we're seeing, which is awesome, is the brands who had to cut on more of that sort of brand building, trust building side of marketing are starting to get back to making investments in the brand side. And what they're seeing is a lift in all their other activities. So it really should never be this brand versus demand. It should be brand and demand and how they help each other and lift each other up. So I wanted to sort of provide contextually where we were, kind of where we are, because there are, I'm sure, many marketers listening who are really excited that they have their brand budgets back. And so we can start to talk about PR in that way. So I'm going to pause and take a breath. I know it's not the question that you asked me, but I'm going to get there.
It's okay. That's the introduction.
I will get there, I promise. But I didn't know if you all had any thoughts, or if you have, with previous guests, are you hearing a lot of this and seeing the same thing?
Yeah, especially, transitioning, whether it's coming out of COVID, right, the last 18 to 24 months, there's been a huge shift, right, in the focus where everyone is really focused on these short gains, and now we're kind of getting back to that normal that we know, and we are seeing a lot of companies really shift and focus, not just on those short gains, but let's get back to the brand, let's get back to what we do, and focusing on that brand as well. So definitely agree with you 100% there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you did ask me a question, and I will answer it, which was what are my top three pieces of advice for landing media coverage? That was
Hmm.
it?
That's
Yeah.
it. Yep. Hmm.
So number one is understand why you're doing PR in the first place.
Right.
Who are we trying to influence through PR? Typically, we find one of four areas. You're looking to influence prospects, you're looking to influence potential investors, you're looking to influence partners, and you're looking to influence talent. So, depending on where you are with your business and the scale, those priorities will shift over time, but they have different strategies. So, first and foremost, it's who are we trying to influence? Because there's a different way if we're looking to attract top talent.
Hmm.
The types of covers and the types of stories that you're going to chase are going to be very different than if we're trying to get in front of investors. So that would be a number one first piece of advice is why are we doing this in the first
Okay.
place? My second piece of advice is to be very clear on your point of view and what you have to say. There's a lot of noise. There's so much noise that you can't really even break through the noise anymore.
Yeah.
It's really shifted into how we can build trust in what we're saying. But be very clear on what it is that you are trying to say, whether that is you as a spokesperson, and if I'm the leader of the company,
Hmm.
or what the brand stands for. And then ensure everything that you do maps back to that point of view because authenticity today matters more than it did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So be very clear on who you're trying to influence and what you're trying to say to them. And then lastly is don't rely on press releases to get there. Um, Press releases is some people literally think PR means press release um, as opposed to public relations, and really it's really more perception relations more than anything now. And a press release still is a tool, but the reality is it's a statement of fact. And I'm not kidding. This is true. If I could put out a press release about my daily schedule as Lindsey Groepper, I could put it out on a paid wire service and it would get the same exact RSS feed pickups as your press release about your new version of your product
Wow.
or your, whatever the topic is about your new webinar that you're hosting.
Yep.
Wire services they're good in that they show a moment in time, they're indexed, you can search them, it shows momentum, it shows growth. But a wire release very rarely will actually yield press coverage because there's too many of them at any given time. So when you get these pickups, it's really just it's a quick RSS feed to those outlets, and then it sort of disappears. So press releases in and of themselves, putting on the wire, won't yield you stories. They have to be pitched. They have to have one-on-one interaction with a member of the media, whether that's a contributor, an editor, reporter, to provide the story and the context behind it. So if you're relying on press releases, number one, to try and tell your story, it's a statement of facts, it won't get you there, and it's definitely not going to get you there if you just put it over the wire. So what you have to do is ensure that you are promoting the story behind the release and providing color commentary, and then using the release as backup to that story that you're trying to tell.
Okay, awesome. So I'm hearing three things, right? So focus on, who is your target, right? What's your target audience? What you want to say. Make sure that with that target audience, make sure your message is clear and concise, and that you guys really hone in on that. And then three is the wire, right? The wire releases, will not alone will not get the job done, right? You have to kind of maybe use that as a secondary piece and kind of hone in there and make sure that there's additional pressure telling the story Another really cool thing that I've never heard this before. Instead of for PR, perception, right? The perception. Everyone always says perception is reality. So keep an eye out, for the perception, and just make sure that you understand and you're really focused on how that's perceived. So that's a really insightful. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And perception is now, I mean, it's instant.
Yes.
10 years ago, we had, or I'll even say, 20 years ago when we started Blast Media, it was pre-iPhone, pre-social media. So yes, I'm a dinosaur for those
Whole
who are
different world.
um, so you used to have time to shape your perception.
Mhm.
Something would happen that you needed to react to potentially, and you had time. Time was on our side, right? We could get a group together before it went public. We can get our message down, and we can control the way in which it gets disseminated to the public. Now perception is instantaneous, and or how someone's going to perceive your reaction to something is right away. So any internal communication is no longer internal. Anything that you send internally can be external in a second. And if you do not react to that, even no reaction will have a certain perception, right, of it. So it is a lot more difficult today. There's just a lot more pressure around creating this perception because you do not have time to get it perfect and to get it right. So it is a much more challenging world for communicators today because it's always on and anything internal can be external with the blink of an eye.
So one of the things that you had mentioned, well, actually, I have a question just based on something you said earlier. Talking about the wire release, is there a point in time in the past where it held a lot more weight than it currently does now?
This is just personal opinion. I mean, of myself and our agency is no. I mean, a wire release is I said it there there is value there. So I'm not like anti wire release, but one thing that we will counsel our clients on is number one, does this even need a release? And because sometimes if you just put up the information on a blog post, we can, direct back there. Or we can use it in our pitching efforts, but doesn't need to be released. And number two, if it is released, doesn't need to go in a wire. What if it's something that is designed to show growth and momentum? Maybe you want that out there, for a point in time, but maybe you don't. So we don't need a release in order to get coverage around that particular item. So is there value? There is, but do you need it to distribute your release? You don't. And so that just begs the question of, okay, well, you said, do you even need a release? Because a lot of the brands that invest in PR and I'm going to talk about private versus public. If you're a public company, it's a whole other thing. You sneeze and everybody writes about it. So like your releases go out over the wire. There are editors who literally cover your space, your particular org. So for the sake of this conversation, let's talk about non-public companies.
Sure.
Is the vast majority of brands who are investing in PR, very little of their coverage is derived from an announcement. It is more consisting of op-eds or point of view pieces. They might be podcast appearances like this. It's interviews. It's a piece of contributed content in a trade outlet. It could be a quote that's part of a larger trend story based on a reaction to what's happening in the world with competitors. It's chasing the amazing stories that live within your customer base and having them and training them to participate in press opportunities on your behalf and lifting up those customer voices as your advocates. It's leveraging data that lives within your organization or surveys that is backing up the reason that your company exists. So there are so many different ways to elevate your brand through PR that literally have nothing to do with releases.
Wow.
So they're good. They're a statement. They show moments in time. We certainly write them, we distribute them, we pitch them. But that alone, press release strategies alone do not change hearts and minds. They do not tell a story, and they do very little to shape a perception.
And one of the things you mentioned earlier too, talking about brands, really, what does the brand stand for? Which kind of leads me to my question for you is like, what are some of the ways that PR boosts brand reputation in today's current business environment?
Yeah, it's a great question because this answer is different based on generationally where we are with decision makers and top talent. So today, at the age that millennials are now, is these are your buying decision makers. These are now decision makers at VCs and PE firms. They are leading partnerships at other companies that you want to partner with or resell. And they're also your VP level talent that you're looking to recruit. This group, as a generation, cares about different things than others. And those things make a very big difference on how you need to approach your brand strategy. Um, this generation of millennials, they value connection and trust and purpose. They have to feel a connection with a brand in order to buy them, partner with them, invest in them, work for them. So knowing that that is for the underlying areas of importance for buyers, partners, talent is you have to look beyond these traditional corporate talk tracks where it is typically the CEO focused on earnings, or if you're a private company focused on innovation and product enhancements. What you have to do is figure out how are we going to form a connection with this new generation of decision makers, and the way to do that is through humanizing your brand. So what does that mean? That means that you have to diversify your spokesperson bench and start tapping leaders that are going to resonate with these buyers. This could be leveraging your CHRO and talking about all of the mental health initiatives you have going on at your organization. It could be talking about how you're elevating the LGBTQ community, if that's important to you. It is potentially tapping your DEIB leader within your organization to, in the media, talk about all of the fantastic things that org is doing, or providing advice for other companies, because those stories are going to resonate with this type of millennial decision maker. And then on the CEO side of the house, it's really getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Is if I'm going to go work for someone, if the salary's the same, if the benefits are the same, roughly, right, same opportunity, I'm going to work for the person that I feel like matches my values. And one way to do that is to talk about your leadership philosophy, what drives your winning culture as the leader of the company externally, rather than keeping it just to these corporate talk tracks. So really the modern corporate narrative is changed, and it's really demanded by these millennial decision makers. And that's just fundamentally different than where we were 5 or 10 years ago.
I like that. It seems like there's more of a true approach for a human connection rather than just, this is where I work, this is what I do. It's like, you have to feel like you gel and fit.
Yes.
And relate to those people.
Yeah, I've even seen conversations, similar to what you mentioned, Lindsey, where, maybe someone, really qualified candidate is looking at two companies. One company, has a brand where they're known for, humanizing, right, that aspect. And, ultimately that's the brand that'll win out. So I definitely appreciate that feedback. For those listening, right, get rid of the old ways, let's start adopting the new ways. Let's humanize it. To play devil's advocate, Peter asked a great question in terms of how PR boosts, right, the brand recognition there. So what do you generally see happen to businesses that will neglect or underinvest in their PR efforts? I know that, that happens as well.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned it before, is number one, their demand efforts suffer.
Okay.
Right. If you're not investing in sort of that top of the funnel, the bottom of the funnel is going to suffer. So you do see your demand efforts suffer, where you might pour more money into demand, and we talked about that short-term gain, but it's going to decline over time. It is not sustainable if you're also not investing in the brand side. So that will happen. The other is you're going to start losing deals. I mean, again, you versus your competitor, you will start losing deals if you're not making your potential customers or current customers feel a certain way about your brand. And if those values aren't evident and they're not carried through, you'll start to lose. Because you said perception is reality, and we've seen it happen time and time again, where the my perception of a certain company is that they're growing, that they have momentum, that they're innovating, that they have incredible culture and leadership. True or untrue, it might be a shit show internally, but externally, based on what they're putting out, and what you're seeing, that's shaping my perception. And we've seen that also where we'll see these growth announcements or these great culture things, and someone internally at the org, and you're like, boy, that does
Yeah.
not match. But that's right. That's the perception.
It's a perception.
And that
Yeah.
is based on. So it is within your control. And you as a marketer, and if you're in charge of comms or you have an agency, figure out what story you want to tell, because I would tell you, if what you're trying to do is just get product features, and I still get inbound leads that say, we want a PR firm to help us announce our products and talk about our product.
Yeah.
That's not going to cut it.
Right.
Or they'll say, I want a product feed, we want like the Wall Street Journal to feature our product. It's like, if you can find me a link to a story from the Wall Street Journal that's doing a product feature on a company that no one's ever heard of, please send it my way, and we'll be happy to track that down. But it just doesn't happen.
Doesn't happen.
And so, but there are ways to get in the Wall Street Journal, certainly as a brand, as a small brand, and we do it, but it is not through announcing your product. There is a high cost associated with not investing in brand and subsequently PR. What is the cost of not having warm leads?
Right.
It's immense.
It's devastating. Yeah.
It's devastating, and it is, what is the cost of not forming connection with buyers? Huge. Right. So and while you can't ever take, a PR spend and immediately tie it to ROI, that was true 20 years ago. It's true today. If I could tell everyone just stop trying to freaking measure brand, I would. Marketers know this. Like, we know this, that there is probably 30% of your budget that you cannot tie directly to pipeline or ROI, but if you get rid of it, everything else suffers. Like, we know it.
Yeah.
But that's not enough when you're reporting to a CEO and a board who says, we need 20,000 leads. It's like, well, go buy them. You can literally go buy them. They're going to be terrible and nothing's going to happen. But if that's all you're looking for, like, we can purchase it. We purchase leads, but it is not a good long-term strategy. One of my favorite quotes, and I've said it many times, is that scaling revenue wins quarters, but a strong brand wins categories. And I wholeheartedly believe it is so true. So you can focus on winning the quarter. You can focus on winning the long game and winning the category. It's a clear choice.
That's awesome. Definitely gonna write that quote down.
That's actually a perfect segue for my question is, PR and brand building in general kind of feel like it's a more of an undervalued strategy than, let's say sales. How do you measure ROI when it comes to PR activities?
Yeah. You can't measure ROI as it is classically defined, does not work in a PR measurement scenario. So ROI meaning I'm going to dollars in, dollars out. Right. That's how we typically measure ROI. It does not work with PR, and it does not work with brands in general. But if what is our ROI, if we change the definition of that, is that increasing awareness? Is it gaining trust? Is it lifting some of our SEO efforts? Is it elevating maybe it's our chief product officer as a thought leader and raising that executive profile? If we start to define our ROI a bit differently, then PR becomes measurable. And the problem with most PR measurement today is that you're measuring like against your own goals. So like I could say as a PR agency, well, our goal is to get 20 pieces of coverage this quarter. So we measure against our own goal. Great, we meet it, but then the CMO goes into their quarterly business report and it's just like, here's all the things I did to move our business forward. And it's like, and our PR firm got coverage. Like it's on its island and it's not tied to any real business value or objectives. So the most important thing to do is to understand how's the overall marketing org being measured, right? If we're being managed by the CMO, or if you're the CMO measure and you have an agency underneath you, it's understanding what are the marketing objectives, how are they being measured, and then look at those objectives and figure out how PR can support those. So if one of the objectives at the larger marketing org is it's all about leads, right, and building pipeline, increase pipeline, high goal, and then it is by increasing our organic traffic by 10%, right? Well, then what we can do as a PR agency and what you can do through PR to help with that organic traffic is that you measure and chase how much coverage that you secure contains a backlink to the target landing pages. You can measure how much of your PR coverage contains their target SEO key phrase that they're looking to rank for. You can look at things like domain authority. What is the strength of site that we're securing coverage with a backlink that, again, helps with overall strength of site on the SEO side? So then it's less about, oh, we got coverage, but then the CMO can go in and say, here's our marketing objectives that we're measuring against. One of them is lift in organic traffic. Here's all the levers we pulled to reach that. PR is one of those levers. And then all of a sudden, PR is ingrained with driving business value versus just getting coverage. So I would say reframe what ROI means and then ensure that your PR programs are tied to much broader business driving objectives.
That's cool. Yeah, so maybe the ROI doesn't initially jump out, right? But as you said, kind of, dig deeper, make sure that those efforts are tied in, to those broader efforts. And yeah, no, it makes perfect sense, and it's really eye opening. And I know that Blast Media, you guys are one of the PR firms that that one of the few that work like that are exclusive with like SaaS. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
that I
We've
know
been
that's
doing,
big.
yeah, we've been doing B2B software since before SaaS was a category. So
Yeah.
when all software was on-prem, on disk,
Yes.
we were doing it back then. But then as this category merged, most of our clients were going to a cloud delivery model.
Yeah.
So we just sort of found our niche in the B2B SaaS category.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just really wanted to highlight that, right? And knowing our audience, we are obviously a SaaS company. Just wanted to kind of add that just to your experience and
Thank you.
yeah, yeah, definitely. So my next question, this is again kind of a lot of brands today will kind of find themselves in the midst of controversy, even like in industries that like you might not expect. How should companies leverage like PR in moments where you do get that unexpected controversy, like or whether it's like a full-on crisis? Like how do you manage that?
Yeah. So my first piece of advice is understand not if it will happen, it's when.
Mhm.
And I had a conversation recently because I'm on the front lines of bringing new clients on to the agency, and
Okay.
we as part of our sort of PR councils, we include crisis comms with all of our clients when and if they need it. We're here, right?
For sure.
And then someone said, well, we can take that out because I don't anticipate needing it. And I was like, exactly. Like, no one,
That's right.
no one anticipates having a crisis, which is why it's a crisis.
That's right.
Uh, so it is not an if, it's a when and to what degree. And I'll go back to something I said earlier, which is you used to have time to react, time to formulate a strategy, internally and externally, right? And with third parties. Today that is gone. So know that it will happen. So have some sort of a plan in place, at least with sort of like I'm gonna again date myself, but like the old school phone tree. It's like who needs to know next and in what
That's right.
order that this stuff has happened. For those of you that are listening and they're like, what the hell's a phone tree? I just need to back up and just like this is the world that I grew up in. If there was so just think about this. If school was canceled,
That's the phone
you
tree.
had been given a phone, you had been given a list at the beginning of the year, your parents were given a list that literally had in order this parent's to call this one's to
Yep.
call that one. It was called a phone tree. So that's what that is, which I'm sure just sounds so archaic.
It
But
doesn't. It doesn't.
oh, whatever, Brandon, you had never had a phone tree in your life.
See, we're a call center software, so when I hear phone tree, I kind of like I definitely identify with it. Maybe not in the same way, but
No, you've never had a phone tree. No,
there
there
that's
was
amazing.
no
I'm
there
a
was no
different
mobile.
life here, and
Anyway.
when you said phone tree, I knew exactly what you meant. It's like, oh yeah.
So when crisis comes, at least understand in what order people need to receive information and who's going to be involved. Just know that that's going to
Yep.
happen. And
Yep.
the other thing with crisis is you certainly cannot plan for all. But if you're a technology company, you will have a data breach. Like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So you can be proactive in some of your crisis strategies. There's always things that you can't prepare for, but you do have likely scenarios that could happen. But gone are the days of saying nothing, because information is going to get out and people expect a response. So ensure that you are responding in enough time. I will say whoever the spokesperson is, do not let him or her do it on their own, because very rarely is your first emotional response the best response. So while speed matters, ensure that you have a team of folks who are part of that crisis team that can work with you on that first initial statement. But it is going to happen, and you do need to have some sort of a plan in place, because the information is going to get out, and people not only expect it to be quick, they expect you to be transparent, and they want to know what you're going to do to ensure it doesn't happen again.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, I completely agree, and it kind of ties to a point that you mentioned earlier when you said you were talking about communication, and expect even if it's internal, expect it to be external, and same thing goes with being prepared for that crisis. Have a plan in place, have a team, be quick, but also be strategic as well. So
Yeah.
that's amazing advice. Yeah.
If I could add on to that too, is think ahead. So a lot of the sort of the more crisis moments that we've seen, at least in the technology industry over the last 18 months, have been surrounding reductions in force, unfortunately. And it is shocking to us how many brands hadn't thought through that internal goes external thing, knowing that any communication via email, via Slack, via voicemail, any and all of it can be screenshotted, recorded, shared. And so if you just had thought through that communication, internal communication a bit more in the planning process, you could have saved yourself a potential crisis. But that doesn't happen all the time. And so, I mean, it's sort of like you're creating your own chaos in some of these situations.
As we get ready to wind down today's podcast, first of all, thank you for joining us today. It's greatly appreciated.
Very insightful.
Two things I'd like to throw out there. One, is there anything that you would like to plug?
That I would like to plug. Well, first, I apologize. I used a curse word. Sorry for those that are listening if that was offensive. I just get going and it happens. Something I'd like to plug. Potentially, because this was a labor of love for our agency, we just released a ebook that is all about modern public relations. It has a lot of, well, not some of what we covered today in it, but it is You don't have to put your email address in. This is not lead gen. We're not going to come get you. It's just download it. But you can find it at blastmedia.com if you want to take a look. It addresses some of what we talked about, that modern corporate narrative, sort of the new PR infrastructure that's required, and just sort of defining what is modern PR versus digital, traditional, non-traditional. So I guess that would be, if you want to check it out, please do.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And the other thing, really, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up, but as Brandon and I have been co-hosting the podcast now for a while, we always bring food into the conversation. Yes. Maryland is all about the blue crabs. It's always seems to be an easy topic on our side because people, if you're from Maryland, it's just part of who you are. Yeah. And as a transplant to Maryland, it's become part of who I am. Is there anything out there, because you're in the state of Indiana, correct?
Correct. I'm in Indianapolis.
Is there anything food-wise that Indiana is known for or that you have grown to love being from Indiana at this point?
Known for, haven't grown to love. But we are known for it's called a tenderloin sandwich. It is pork and it is massive. It's flattened out, breaded, and fried. So it is about the tenderloin itself is usually about the size of like a small personal pan pizza, maybe. Okay. It's just a massive sandwich, sort of like a grilled sandwich, but it's a thin pork tenderloin. So that is what we're known for. I'm okay on it. I don't get crazy for it, but I do love to eat, and I have won a couple of eating contests.
Oh, that's impressive.
Hey.
In my day, which I'm very proud of being able to do that. So I will try anything, and I am not shy when it comes to eating new foods.
That's pretty cool.
An open palate.
Yes, very.
That's awesome.
But yeah, Lindsey, this has been awesome. I appreciate you bringing all of your expertise and, all the great things you guys are doing at Blast Media, and really just, dropping all this knowledge on us, right? Hopefully everyone who's listening, you guys can pick up some of these gems, and it's been a fun conversation. I appreciate your time today.
Yes, I've had a great time. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Smart Route Podcast. Share your favorite takeaways with us on Twitter at Smart Route Pod. Smart Route is brought to you by CallTrackingMetrics, and you can find more at calltrackingmetrics.com/podcast. Follow along for ideas and conversations that will inspire your own business path forward. Speaking of smart paths, are your marketing, sales, and service teams on the same page? In today's remote world, it's easy to get disconnected. CallTrackingMetrics can help. We empower smart marketing teams to determine the best route for campaigns by showing exactly which ad campaigns are driving conversations that convert. Operational teams can use that data to automate call flows and power contact center success. Visit CallTrackingMetrics.com to see why more than 100,000 customers around the globe trust CallTrackingMetrics to manage communications for their marketing, sales, and service teams.